My father, Garth Wiebe, wrote an article concerning marriage and divorce according to the scriptures in December of 2014. In 2018, he released a 2-hour series of videos with the same overall content. This exhaustive review of the subject contains a relatively short excerpt concerning Matthew 5:32 and its parallel passage Matthew 19:9. Due to the prevailing translation tradition, I have observed that people often have trouble with this passage in particular. My father explains it briefly, but then in his classic blunt manner says, "If you do not understand this, back up the video and play again." My work here is an attempt to attack the matter from a slightly different angle to help you wrap your head around it. Let's start with the assumptions that I believe are properly explained elsewhere in Garth's coverage of the subject. I strongly recommend that you take some time to review his entire essay or video series and return to this video only if you still have concerns. However, if you are simply interested in understanding the Matthew exception clause, you should at least understand the following necessary facts. Firstly, the words husband and wife do not exist in the original Hebrew or Greek language manuscripts. Anywhere you see those words in an English translation of the Bible, you should remember that the translators have taken the liberty of translating from the words man or woman based on the context. This is not inherently troublesome and is usually appropriate, but can occasionally cause confusion, as we will see here. For more information, watch this 3-minute video. The word divorce is also not used in the same context as we understand it today. English speakers understand divorce as the ending of a marriage. However, in the Bible there is no marriage status as we understand it today, and so there cannot be an ending of it. A man takes a woman, marries her, and they become one flesh. This cannot be undone except through death. The word divorce in Scripture refers to the sending away or loosing off, and is used more commonly in non-marital contexts. Refer to this 15-minute video for details. Now to the passage. The New American Standard Version, 1995, reads, "But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife except for the reason of unchastity makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." The King James Version reads, "But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery." Translators determine that this verse is in the context of married people, and they are correct. But by making that determination and then translating woman to wife, they obfuscate the purpose of the except for clause of this statement. This obfuscation leads to the translation tradition of adding the reason of or the cause of, which is not explicitly in the text and appears to allow a man to put away his wife if she is unfaithful. Let's look at this word for word.
"But I tell you that anyone who looses off his woman, except for porneia, causes her to become an adulteress." Now we see that what Jesus said begins to get simpler in principle. Let's examine that hot-button clause with the word porneia in it. The term porneia and related words refer to sexual immorality, fornication, prostitution, and the like. We obviously get the prefix porn from that in English. Given that Jesus is addressing and speaking of the individual committing the act, or the intention of his heart, then the clause naturally refers to the one committing or intending to commit the act, not the other person. In other words, not the woman.
So as you see, this except for porneia clause is still referring to the man. How does this work? Let's break this down. Starting with the anyone. Who is anyone? We get the answer to this from the rest of the context. The use of male pronouns and a female counterpart would indicate that this is talking about any man. But is it any married man? Context will dictate. Even today, in English, you may hear a man refer to his girlfriend as my woman. This is even more common in other languages, such as Spanish. This turn of phrase was also common in the time of Jesus. So the use of the possessive his here does not automatically communicate the scope of anyone. See in the diagram. A man who has a woman could be a man with his girlfriend or a man with his wife. This, except for porneia, then simply clarifies everyone to mean that Jesus is only talking about a man and his wife, and not cases where a man has a girlfriend. I will reiterate, because this is the central fact that is almost universally overlooked and typically the hardest to wrap one's head around. Everyone who sends away his woman could be referring to a man who sends away the woman he married and became one flesh with, or it could be referring to a man who is sleeping with his girlfriend with no such marital commitment. Would it make sense that Jesus is telling us that, in the second case, the man, by sending his girlfriend away, makes her commit adultery? Of course not. Any man sleeping with a woman who is not his wife should put her off.
And becomes elegantly simple. A man should not loose off his woman unless it is the case that he is having immoral, extramarital relations with the woman, in which case he obviously should loose off the woman.
So you see that while Jesus is in fact talking about a man and a wife in this context, the translation of woman to wife obfuscates the purpose of the except for porneia clause, because the clause is only there to reiterate that the context of the passage is in fact married men. To paraphrase Matthew 5:32, "But I tell you that, in the case of a married man, if he sends his woman away, he causes her to become an adulteress." This is elegantly simple, and puts to bed any further what-if analyses to find biblical grounds for divorce. This ends my analysis of Matthew 5:32, but I cannot end the video without first emphasizing that we should not be searching the scriptures for justification for our sin. Divorce is a wicked act in direct violation of God's intent. In fact, if there were biblical grounds for divorce, it would be incompatible with the idea of forgiveness. Divorce, for any reason, produces a legal certificate proving that you do not forgive your wife for whatever she did to offend you. If you are unsure how Jesus feels about unforgiveness, go read the parable of the unmerciful servant in Matthew 18:21-35. If you are unsure what it truly means to forgive, watch this video. Aside from misunderstandings of Matthew 5:32 or Matthew 19:9 as addressed here, and perhaps 1 Corinthians 7:15, there is no question. God made marriage as a permanent institution. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother, and the two shall become one flesh, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. What, therefore, God has joined together, let no man separate. Mark 10:6-9. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Ephesians 5:32. Imagine if God would send us, his church, away, and take another. Perhaps the Hindus? This is nonsense. Do not leave your spouse. Do not marry someone whose spouse is still alive. I grant this work to the public domain.